And in this video, I want to talk about wood, one of my favorite subjects. Well, if you watched the last video that I just did, I think I called it a tornado. And it was about a yard that was ravaged by a windstorm. It wasn't a tornado, but it sure felt like it could have been for all the damage that had occurred in this yard. So the trees that went down were all cypress trees. They were Arizona cypress. And in our area, we have primarily three different types of cypress. We have the Italian cypress, and that wood is okay, but it's very knotty. It's got lots of little pinhole knots in it because it's got branches everywhere. We've got the Monterey cypress, which is a beautiful wood, but you don't find many trees suitable for milling very often. I have milled it before, and it is well worth keeping if you find it. And finally, we have another one that's an ornamental tree in many yards. It's called the Arizona cypress. These are the primary cypress in our area, and I know in other parts of the country there's a lot of other varieties of cypress. But what I wanted to talk about a little bit today is the wood, because in that video I showed you that I salvaged a bunch of the logs. I took the logs over to my buddy Toby's house, who has a sawmill, and it's a bandsaw mill, so we sliced up a bunch of them, and I brought a piece of it home. It's still very green, so it's not ready to be used, but I wanted to run it through the planer just to get a better idea of it. So today I'd like to show you this wood and talk about cypress wood just a little bit. In that video, I showed you a quick shot of an Adirondack chair that I built out of this exact same type of wood. And I wanted you to look very closely. It's a tight grain, slow growing tree. Most of these trees are only 12 or 14 inches in diameter, but the growth rings, they were all over 50 years old. So there's a real tight amount of growth rings in here. So there's a lot of things about cypress wood that are quite useful and beneficial. And this is a type of wood that is frequently utilized for outdoor furniture. It is decay resistant, it is rot resistant, it is insect resistant, and it holds up fairly well. It will change colors, it will gray out, which is part of the reason I kept that other one in the house. But I wanted you to see what the wood looks like. If you ever get an opportunity to work with cypress, I highly recommend that you try it, because I ran this through the planer, and it's like a glass finish. I mean, it is so beautiful. I can only imagine what this will be like when I sand it up and take it up to 220 or even finer grit. I mean, you don't feel any roughness. You don't feel any raising of the grain. There's a lot of qualities to this wood that I really, really like. So more than likely, I'm going to mill up most of this wood and use it for outdoor furniture. I'd like to make some Adirondacks, and I'd also like to make some children's tables and children's chairs and things like that. It's not a heavy wood, as are all cone trees, cone-bearing trees. This is a soft wood, but that doesn't mean that the wood is soft. Now, the word softwood refers to whether the tree bears cones or not. So we're talking pines and redwoods and firs and cypress, and there's a whole bunch of different types of trees that are cone-bearing trees, and those are referred to as softwoods. Interestingly enough, a ginkgo is a cone-bearing tree, and it is also a softwood. That doesn't mean that the wood is a soft wood. This is quite hard. It's as hard as walnut. It's probably as hard as a lot of other hardwoods that we work with. It's not near as hard as maple, or it's probably got about the same density as ash. I don't know if you could use it for baseball bats or tool handles. Now, if you're making a tool handle, you want something that's strong, but you also want something that is going to have a certain amount of shock resistance as well. And typically, one of the more common woods for tool handles has been hickory. Pecan will also work, as will ash. Ash is just as good, in my opinion. That's something that a lot of people will argue. But woods have certain characteristics that we've kind of lost sight of, because in this modern world, tool handles are no longer, really thought of in the same way as they were 100 years ago. Many tool handles are made out of plastics or fiberglass, or if they are wood, they're manufactured in a way that doesn't really follow the consistency or the grain orientation very well. Some woods are commonly used for construction, such as redwood. And redwood has been used as an outdoor wood for a long time, used in fences and decking. But there was a time when the redwood forests were milled, the old growth redwood forest. It was the premier wood in California anyway, and Oregon, for home construction. It was a much lighter wood. It held up fairly well. Not quite as strong as fir, but the old growth redwood was very durable and decay and insect resistant. Now that doesn't stand true for a lot of the redwood today. The redwood forest, the old growth redwood forests that were able to be milled are pretty much gone. So what we're dealing with is second growth or even faster growing woods. And as you can see, the growth rings are much wider. So that makes for a tree that is no longer decay resistant or is no longer rot resistant. So the qualities that this particular tree became famous for is no longer true. Now here's a nice cant of walnut that could be used for a gun stock. It's quite thick. I think you need about 3 inches for a gun stock. And gun stock wood can be common or it can be highly desirable depending upon the figure pattern. But you want nice straight grain in the fore portion of the stalk, and the back part of the stalk is often much more figured. This piece does have some fiddleback in it. It's kind of hard to see there, but that would make a nice gun stock. Here's an interesting piece of wood. This is camphor wood. And camphor wood was often utilized in the making of boxes that stored metal instruments from China, because this type of wood emits an oil. It sort of vaporizes inside the box. You don't want to finish the inside of the box if you're using camphor wood for that purpose. But if you had certain types of delicate steel instruments and you wanted to protect them, this was a type of wood that would naturally protect the wood, because it would be a light coating of a film of the oils. And this is a very aromatic wood too. When I mill this stuff in the shop, the whole shop just takes on a very, very strong odor. Here's a couple of cutting boards I made out of that same camphor. One of these is actually a gift to the person that had to have that tree taken out. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I'll make a little woodworking gift from the tree that maybe meant something to the person. This tree had to go, but the person didn't want to lose it. So it lives on in their kitchen. Now here's a piece of glued up, very, very hard maple. And this maple is a European maple. It's got some figure to it. And this is going to end up being a countertop in my kitchen. It's a very stable wood. It's a very, very hard wood. So that's why countertops are typically made out of maple. They hold up really well. This one I wanted it to have a little bit more character to it. Unfortunately, most of this wood was very, very white. And I got to this one, which I couldn't tell was a little bit darker. Then it got light again. So I included this wood here, this board here, into this, and it didn't reveal itself as being a little bit of a shade difference until I sanded it down. So that was a little unfortunate, but it is what it is. I don't want to stain the wood. I don't want to blend it. I'm just going to put a food safe finish on it, because I'm going to put this as a countertop in my kitchen. It's going to be going towards the coffee counter. And I also wanted to show you the variations, because this is the exact same type of maple. And you can see that different areas of the wood will show different darknesses and lightnesses. And this one has got some pretty intense fiddleback going all the way through. So whilst this is exactly the same type of wood, it wouldn't match. You know, I literally have hundreds of different species of wood. And I appreciate the utilitarian aspects of the different woods. Some woods are hard and will hold up well to make spoons or kitchen utensils. Some woods are very good for turning bowls. Other woods are really strong and you'd use them for a certain purpose. You know, in days gone by, the spokes of a wagon were very, very important. They had to take the impact and the shock. So those were frequently made out of hickory or something durable that would hold up well. Now, if you made the wagon wheel spokes out of wood that didn't take the impact, it would beat itself to death in just a short period of time. So the point that I'm trying to make is we have all but lost our understanding of the purposes of what was very, very common, 100 years ago. Certain types of woods were utilized in tools, like hand planes. So the wooden hand planes, the block planes, those were principally made out of beech. And the reason for that was beech was a very tough, hard wood. It was readily available. It didn't expand or contract very much at all. So the tool would hold its flatness fairly well for a long time. And I haven't even begun to talk about exotic tropical hardwoods. This is a very, very interesting wood here. This is called padauk. It's called Andaman padauk, and it has a very interesting color to it. This is a piece that has been out in the, well, not the weather, but in the air for a long time. So it's taken on a deep, dark, almost a chocolatey brown color. But when you mill this stuff up, you know what? I'm going to go run this piece of wood through the planer and show you what it looks like. So this piece of padauk, here's what it looks like when it's exposed to the air. Let me see. There we go. That's what it looks like when it's exposed to the air. It turns this color. And a lot of woods, including cherry, will take on one look at one point when it's freshly surfaced and an entirely different look. And that's what it looks like when it's freshly cut. It's an incredible, beautiful orange color. And a lot of people look at this and think, oh, I'm going to utilize that for a decorative portion of my woodworking project. And they're really disappointed as the wood ages, it loses that brilliance. It turns into something deeper and darker. Now, quite a few years ago, I built this marquetry toolbox, and the wood that I chose, while it may look like walnut or mahogany, was actually this wood, the padauk. And the padauk, it was a brilliant orange color, and I thought, wow, I really like it. I don't dislike it now, but it's a significant change. It's not the same toolbox it was when I first made it. So that's the toolbox that I've got here. I've got lots and lots of marquetry tools. And I fitted a lot of these to this case. I've got lots of little different types of cutting tools. I've got a very large, super sharpened chisel that I can use for cutting groups of veneers. This is marquetry tape for putting it all back together, or veneer tape they call it. Got a brush there. I've got a cool little tool here. I actually made this. Now here's a cool piece of wood. I don't have very much of it because it's a very expensive wood. This is called lignum vitae. This wood is so hard and so dense. It dulls your power tools. It holds up for a lot of utilitarian purposes. And because of that, a lot of tool handles were made out of it, or certain types of instruments that needed long-term durability. I picked this up years and years ago, and this is so heavy, so much heft to it.